Life's been full of surprises since my accident back in 2007. I fell off a roof and injured my spinal cord, leaving me confined to a wheelchair. It's been a tough journey, dealing with the physical challenges and the emotional toll of losing my independence. And just when I thought I was getting the hang of this new life, along came COVID-19. Being high risk due to my condition, I've been extra cautious. I don't go out much, maybe a few times a week for essentials. When I do, I'm always masked up, keeping my distance, and practically bathing in hand sanitizer. It's not the most exciting life, but it beats the alternative. I've already been in a coma once, and trust me, it's not an experience I'm eager to repeat. So there I was, wheeling through the craft section, minding my own business. I noticed this woman and her kid in the next aisle, stealing looks at me. No big deal, I'm used to the stares. But then the kid, probably around 8, decided to invade my personal space. The kid asked me why I was in the wheelchair. I simply told him I fell off a roof. He asked why again, and I jokingly said it was because I didn't eat my vegetables. The kid, still not satisfied, asked why once more. At this point, I politely told him I had to go, trying to end the conversation. But the kid wasn't done. He excitedly asked about the speed of my chair and if he could push the button, referring to the horn on my power wheelchair. I declined and reiterated that I needed to leave. That's when I noticed his mother. She'd snuck up on my blind side, which is the right half of my right eye. Sneaky. The woman demanded to know why I wouldn't answer her son's questions. I explained that I had answered, but really needed to go. She then accused me of being rude to her son, saying he was just curious. She even had the audacity to ask what my mother would think of my behavior. Now, I should mention that my relationship with my mother is complicated. She wasn't exactly Mother of the Year material. In fact, she was downright abusive. When I was in that coma I mentioned earlier, she wanted to pull the plug. And after my dad passed away, she tried to squeeze money out of me and my siblings. So, yeah, not great memories there. But in that moment, I saw an opportunity. I let all those painful memories bubble up, feeling the heat rise to my face and tears well up in my eyes. With a quivering voice, I told her about my parents supposedly dying in a plane crash when I was 19, asking if she wanted to know anything else. I made sure to stutter and shake a bit for extra effect. Now, I should clarify that my mother is unfortunately still kicking. It was my dad and uncle who passed away, but I figured a little white lie wouldn't hurt in this situation. The woman's face went as white as a sheet. She stammered out an apology, clearly shocked by my response. She grabbed her kid and practically sprinted away. I felt a bit guilty for the deception, but also oddly satisfied. It's not often I get to turn the tables on people who think they can just intrude on my life. Maybe next time she'll think twice before assuming she knows someone's story. When I moved into my dad's house temporarily after finishing college, I was job hunting and trying to save money, so it seemed like a good idea at the time. Little did I know our Homeowners Association, HOA, was about to make our lives miserable. Our HOA had a reputation for being sneaky and making false accusations against homeowners. They'd pull stunts like claiming someone reshingled their roof without approval when it hadn't been touched in years. But we were about to get a taste of their tactics firsthand. One morning, my dad and I were heading out for groceries when we noticed his pickup truck had been smashed into. Nothing was stolen, just damage done. We called the cops, and they found a unique polished rock inside the truck that apparently came from a house down the street. Unfortunately, they couldn't prove who did it. After this incident, I installed a security camera on the house. Just 2 days later, we got an HOA violation notice about a vehicle eyesore that needed to be removed. The timing was suspicious, to say the least. A few days passed and we got a knock at the door. It was a code inspection officer called by the HOA. The parts to fix the truck hadn't even arrived yet. The code inspector informed us that vehicles that don't run need to be removed from the property. My dad then realized he recognized the inspector. It turned out the inspector went to the same church as my dad. Small world, right? The inspector then told my dad that if he could show the truck starts, he'd write it up as being in code. My dad started the truck easily since the engine wasn't damaged. The inspector left, but we were furious. How could the HOA have known about the damage so quickly? We suspected foul play. A couple of months later, I installed a dash cam in my car. Soon after, we got another violation notice, this time for our mailbox being crooked. I checked the dash cam footage, and what I saw made my blood boil. The HOA investigator walked up to our perfectly straight mailbox, deliberately pushed it crooked, then took a picture and wrote down his findings. The HOA called us to a board meeting to discuss the issues at our address. We went armed with our evidence. The meeting was run by a woman from the management company who looked exactly like you'd expect Karen to look. Karen told us we needed to keep better care of our property. I responded by telling her we had reason to believe their investigator was causing damage to our property and harassing us. Karen denied this, claiming it was impossible, and that she knew the investigator personally. I challenged her statement and pulled out my laptop to play the video of her investigator pushing our mailbox crooked. Karen tried to deny it was their investigator, but I showed her the letter about the mailbox, matching the date on the video. As the video continued, you could clearly see Bentry Management on the man's shirt. Karen went pale. The board members looked at her, waiting for an explanation. I then asked if their investigator had ever trespassed on our property. Karen denied this as well. Just then, our neighbor, who's a lawyer, spoke up. He contradicted Karen's statement, saying he had seen one of their investigators poking around between our houses and looking through trash bins. Karen started arguing with our neighbor, but the damage was done. The board apologized and said they'd discuss the situation further. A month later, we got a letter saying Karen had been fired and a new person will be managing our area. Since then, we've only had minor issues that get corrected immediately. It just goes to show sometimes you need hard evidence to take down entitled people who abuse their power. I'm just glad we were able to expose the truth and make our neighborhood a little bit better for everyone. I've been looking forward to this trip to Europe with my mom for months. At 38, I don't get to spend as much time with her as I'd like, so this vacation is extra special. My mom's 71 now, and even though she's still full of energy, I can't help but cherish every moment we have together. We're sitting in a cozy cafe in Paris, sipping on rich espresso, when Mom starts telling me about an incident that happened years ago in this very city. I can't help but lean in, fascinated by the mischievous glint in her eye. Mom begins by explaining her difficulty with salespeople, admitting with a slight blush that she struggles to say no, even when they're pushy. She mentions that my father used to tease her about it all the time. I nod, remembering all the times I've had to rescue her from overzealous shop assistants. She continues, explaining that this story took place a few years after she and my father got married, before they had kids. They were in Paris and she wanted to add some French stamps to her collection. Mom explains how she left Dad napping in the hotel and ventured out to the nearby post office, planning to spend a good chunk of money on stamps. Her eyes light up as she describes her excitement, which quickly turns to disappointment as she recounts what happened next. She describes waiting in an impossibly long line, gesturing with her hands. When she finally got to the counter, she says the woman there told her in perfect English that she didn't speak English, which she found unbelievable. I shake my head, already sensing where this story is going. Mom continues, explaining that she waited for another employee, but this one was even worse. She describes how rude the woman was, rolling her eyes and refusing to help with anything. Mom admits she was nearly in tears by the end of it. At this point, I'm getting angry on behalf of my younger mom, but she surprises me with what she did next. She tells me how she went back to the hotel and woke up my father, a sly smile spreading across her face. She brought him to the post office with her, reminding me of how my dad spoke perfect French and Arabic. I nod, remembering my late father's linguistic talents. Mom's grin widens as she continues her tale. She describes waiting for the rude woman to be free again, then having my father translate for her in flawless French. She had him tell the woman she wanted the plate block of every single stamp design they had. Mom pauses for effect, clearly enjoying my rapt attention. She explains that removing a plate block from a sheet of stamps means the remaining stamps have to be counted by hand, which is a real pain. Mom leans in conspiratorially and whispers how. After the woman had pulled out all those plate blocks and had a nice big stack in front of her, she turned to my father and told him to say she'd changed her mind. We both burst into laughter, attracting curious looks from nearby tables. Mom wipes a tear from her eye as she finishes the story. She gleefully recounts how the woman not only missed out on a huge sale but also had to stay late counting all those stamps by hand, probably taking a good hour after closing time. I'm in awe of my usually polite mother's clever revenge. I ask her how the woman reacted when Dad told her she'd changed her mind. Mom's eyes twinkle as she recalls the scene. She describes how the woman's face turned red as a tomato, and she started sputtering in French, while my father kept a straight face and calmly translated her outrage. Mom then narrates the conversation that followed. She explains how she had my father tell the woman she was terribly sorry for the inconvenience, but she decided the stamps weren't quite what she was looking for. The postal worker, whom Mom refers to as Karen, apparently fumed and exclaimed how ridiculous it was, complaining that she'd wasted all that time gathering stamps for nothing. Mom continues, saying she responded with a sweet smile, suggesting that perhaps if the woman had been more helpful from the beginning, things might have turned out differently. She describes how my father struggled to keep a straight face while translating this. According to Mom, the postal worker then spluttered with rage and demanded they leave immediately. Mom says she stood up and cheerfully agreed, wishing the woman a lovely day as they left. We spend the rest of the afternoon wandering through the streets of Paris, and as we pass by a post office, we both burst into giggles, sharing a secret that's been decades in the making. When I moved into this street 6 months ago, I just landed a job at the local hospital as a nurse, and I was excited to start my new life in a peaceful community. At first, everything seemed perfect. The neighbors were friendly, the street was clean, and parking was never an issue. That is, until she showed up. I remember the day she moved in like it was yesterday. A moving truck pulled up to the house across the street, and out stepped this woman with a look on her face like she owned the whole neighborhood. Little did I know she'd soon try to make that a reality. It started small. She began leaving notes on cars parked in front of her house, asking people to move them. Most folks, being polite, would oblige, but then things escalated quickly. One morning I woke up to find fresh white lines painted on the street, creating makeshift parking spots. At first I thought the city had done it overnight, but then I saw her strutting up and down the street, clipboard in hand, looking mighty pleased with herself. I decided to confront her about it. I asked her if she had painted the lines. She proudly confirmed that she had, claiming it was about time someone brought order to the street. When I pointed out that painting lines on a public road wasn't legal, she dismissively told me she could do whatever she wanted, insisting it was her property now. I was shocked. Who did this woman think she was? But it got worse. The next day, she started going door to door, demanding payment for parking. She told me it would cost $50 a month to park in front of her house. When I protested that it was ridiculous and that it was a public street, she said she had claimed it, and that I couldn't park there without paying. I refused, of course. So did most of my neighbors. But Karen wasn't backing down. She started blocking cars with her own, making it impossible for people to leave for work. When one of my neighbors left a polite note asking her to move her car, she called the police, claiming harassment. When the police officer arrived, he asked about the harassment call. Karen immediately accused the neighbor of leaving a threatening note on her car. I jumped in to explain that it was just a polite request to move her car so they could get to work. Karen then accused us all of ganging up on her and demanded we be arrested for trespassing on her property. The officer, looking confused and a bit annoyed, tried to explain that the street was public property, but Karen wouldn't listen. She started ranting about how she'd improved the neighborhood and deserved compensation. Things really spiraled out of control when she started filing lawsuits against anyone who parked in her spots without paying. She even tried to charge people for using their own driveways. She told one neighbor that their driveway connected to her street, so they needed to pay rent for access. When the neighbor called her insane and claimed it was their property, Karen threatened to have their car towed if they didn't pay up. It was chaos. People were stressed, late for work, and constantly worried about where to park. I decided enough was enough. I gathered all the neighbors and we came up with a plan. We contacted the city council and provided evidence of Karen's actions. Photos of her painting the lines, videos of her blocking cars, and copies of her ridiculous invoices for parking. We also got in touch with a local news station, who were more than happy to cover the story of the parking spot tyrant. Karen came out thinking she'd be praised for her entrepreneurial spirit. Instead, she found herself facing a crowd of angry neighbors and a reporter asking some very uncomfortable questions. The reporter asked Karen if she was aware that it was illegal to claim public property as her own and charge for its use. Karen stumbled over her words, trying to justify her actions by saying she was just trying to bring order to the neighborhood. The reporter then pointedly asked if she thought breaking the law and harassing her neighbors was the way to do that. The look on her face when she realized she was being exposed on live TV was unforgettable. But the best was yet to come. The next day, city officials arrived with police escorts. They informed Karen that she was facing multiple charges for vandalism, harassment, and attempting to extort money from her neighbors. They also brought a cleaning crew to remove her illegal parking lines. Karen threw a fit, screaming about how we were all ungrateful and how she'd sue us all. But as they escorted her to the police car, we all breathed a collective sigh of relief. Karen was fined heavily and ordered to pay for the damage she'd caused. She was also required to attend community service and anger management classes. As for us neighbors, we grew closer through this ordeal. We now have regular block parties in the street, using those parking spots as they were meant to be used, free for all.